both moved over. No, one has moved over. The other one has slotted back in again. It's the Scottish 863 car of Paul Whiteman that he now gets off. And there they are. There's the first and second. They're the two contenders together. 3:06 and 63, and very few yards to separate them. The big question now is how much difficulty is George going to have getting past? It's one thing to catch him, it's another thing to pass him. So, another look at the lap sheets tells us that 58 laps have gone in this 1988 World Championship event. 75 laps is the distance. Still plenty of time, with 63 Phil White the leader, 3:06 George Polly is second, 4:98 Nigel Murphy is third, 3:51 Barry Lee is fourth, 3:02 Andy Harris is fifth, 9:62 Ormond Christie is next, and then number 8. But this is the chance, the first chance that George Polly has got, and Phil White must be aware of the danger. George has decided that that wasn't the time he wanted to go by. Phil White responded beautifully. The drivers know where they are because at one end of the track there's a large illuminated indicator board, so they can see very clearly. And I'm sure Phil White has been watching that 3:06 number slowly moving up the board. And he's in no doubt at all now about it. He can see in his mirror that George Polly is there. And against all the odds is mounting one of the most remarkable challenges I think we've ever seen in this event. Nothing to choose between them. A non-contact formula, and you can't get much closer than that without contact. George Polly, never a man afraid to go by on the outside. All these tactics of switching from one side to the other are to unnerve the driver. The pressure on Phil White now must be almost irresistible. If ever a man was in the hot seat, it's Phil White. Around the outside they go, they come off the bend, and as they come off the bend, it's George Polly by about half a wheel length. But of course, it's very difficult to maintain that all the way around the bend with the other driver beginning to drift a little wide. Don't say we're going to have 20 laps of this. The tension will be unbearable. The pressure on these drivers is stupendous. Another attempt. George Polly went a little bit on the inside there and just picked up the mud, the shale and the water on the inside of the speedway track. And of course, there's not much grip to be had out there. Once again, Polly wide off the bend, trying perhaps to get a little bit of momentum as he comes off the turn, but with these conditions, that's not easy. Here we come, once again, 3:06. A White. George Polly wears glasses, and that has to be a handicap in this because you can put various shields up on the front of the car. That's what those odd-shaped pieces of metal on the front of the bonnet are for, to try and deflect some of the spray over the top. But there's a limit to how much, in fact, it can deflect. Although you can see, in fact, there, on that shot, when the water really does fly, it works. It just lifts the majority of it neatly over the top of the car. But a certain amount comes back, and onto your goggles if you wear them, or onto your glasses. There's the spray, just lifting off the front of that car. Well, if you wear goggles, you can take them off and let the muck go in your eyes. You finish up with very red eyes, but if you wear glasses and you can't see too well without them, as is the case with George, you've got no option. So, what are the tactics going to be? He's tried a bit of pressure, and so far it hasn't worked. It's a real game of cat and mouse, this. And I must say, Phil White at the moment is resisting that pressure splendidly. George is sitting there scratching his head, but he's a patient sort of man. He'll be trying to think of some tactic that might just move him over. Probably, I think, the very best chance for George will come once we get up with some back markers, because then, of course, it's not entirely in the hands of Phil White or George Polly. It depends what the guys do, and the back markers are now coming up. And in the next few laps, I think the next real opportunity for George Polly to go by is going to present itself. Another little nibble round the outside, perhaps not a too serious attempt, but he's got to keep the pressure on. must keep Phil White feeling that he can't afford to make the slightest mistake, he can't afford to make the slightest slip. He's got to hang on, he's got to keep going, and we've got back markers now that could open the door. And 303, Jeff Simpson gives way very easily and lets the two leaders through, but there are 4 or 5 in front now, and that could be the chance. George Polly seems to drift a little wide there, but he's got it well under control. The back end often drifts right out, but that doesn't really matter. George can control it. Coming right into the closing stages now. There's just one more lap to go, and we're really coming to it now, and the pressure has got to go on. If George Polly's going to do it, he's got to do it now. This is the final straight, and over the line they go, and George can't get past. He has to settle for that second place. A brave effort by George Polly, a tremendous effort by George Polly, but equally we mustn't take anything away from Phil White. He drove a superb race. The pressure was intense and he resisted it throughout those 75 laps to become the 1988 National Hot Rod World Champion. Further back, 351, Barry Lee finished up with a very creditable third place. For 98, Nigel Murphy was in fact 4th, 302 Andy Harris 5th, and 962 Ormond Christie was 6th as the place